You are standing in the dark,
Mm-hmm.
and a door has just slammed right in your face.
Yeah.
And you can actually hear the sound of someone on the other side, like double bolting it.
Wow. Yeah. That sound.
Right. So you knock, you plead, you wait, and you are just met with this absolute deafening silence.
It's terrifying.
It is. And if you've lived long enough, you have probably stood in front of that exact metaphorical door.
Absolutely. Everyone does eventually.
You've experienced that moment where the theology you've, so confidently recited in the sunlight just suddenly feels completely useless.
Right, like it just evaporates.
Exactly. It evaporates in the midnight of real visceral suffering. So, welcome to Reformed Thinking.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, we are taking you into this deep dive on the darkest, honestly most agonizing stretch of one of the greatest minds of the 20th century.
Yeah, it really is a heavy one.
It's heavy. We are examining Chapter 3 of C.S. Lewis's remarkably raw, basically unedited journal, A Grief Observed.
And it is a text that really demands to be read with reverence, but also with rigorous theological scrutiny.
Right, we can't just read it for the emotional impact.
Exactly. Just to give you some background, Lewis wrote this under a pseudonym, N.W. Clerk, back in the winter of 1960.
He didn't even want his name on it at first.
No, he didn't. He was writing in the immediate bleeding aftermath of the death of his wife.
Joy David Modeman.
Right, Joy Davidman, whom he just refers to as H in the journal.
Just the letter H.
Yeah. And she died in excruciating agony from bone cancer.
Which is just brutal.
That's horrific. So this is not the polished, confident C.S. Lewis of mere Christianity that you might be used to.
The guy with all the answers.
Not at all. This is a man whose entire intellectual and spiritual framework has just been subjected to a massive earthquake.
A total collapse. And to set the lens for our deep dive today, we are going fundamentally against the grain of how this book is usually treated, right?
Oh, completely.
Because often people read A Grief Observed merely as a psychological study of mourning.
Or like a self-help book.
Yeah, like they try to extract some therapeutic comfort from it. And we are not doing that today.
No, we are not.
We are going to examine Lewis's devastating experience of loss through a strict, confessional, Reformed theological framework.
Which changes everything about how you read it.
It really does. We're contrasting that modern, therapeutic, seeker-sensitive Christianity,
Right.
the kind that implicitly promises you an exemption from sorrow, or at least a quick emotional fix.
The kind that says God just wants you to be happy.
Exactly. We're contrasting that with the historic biblical reality of the absolute sovereignty of God in affliction.
And that distinction, honestly, is the only way to actually make sense of what Lewis is experiencing here.
You have to have that lens.
You do. Because if you approach this text looking for a theological Band-Aid, you will be disappointed.
You'll leave more depressed than when you started.
Yeah, and frankly, you will miss the profound grace that's actually operating underneath all his despair.
Yeah.
This journal isn't just a biography. It is a terrifying mirror held up right to the reader.
It really is. It forces you to look at yourself.
It forces you to look at your own foundation and ask a deeply uncomfortable question, which is your faith a living reality anchored in the sovereign decrees of God? Or is it just a fragile house of cards waiting for the first severe wind of providence to scatter it?
Wow. A house of cards waiting for the wind. That's the hook right there.
It's sobering.
So let's jump right into the atmosphere of Chapter 3. To give you some context, by this point in his journaling, Lewis has moved past the initial shock.
Right, the immediate aftermath.
Yeah, that acute screaming terror of the immediate loss, the physical paralysis, the concussive shock that hits you right after the funeral.
Where you can barely breathe.
Exactly. That part has faded, but what replaces it is arguably worse.
Much worse, yeah.
He enters this suffocating, heavy apathy. He describes a reality where, even when he isn't actively, consciously thinking about his wife, the world itself just feels fundamentally wrong.
Like it's off its axis.
Yeah. He talks about noticing a clock striking or looking out his window at the reddening rowan berries in the yard.
Right, just normal, everyday things.
Listen, normal things. But it evokes this pervasive, sickening flatness. He calls it the squalor of grief.
Squalor. Yeah, that word is deliberately chosen.
It's such a specific word.
It conveys this sense of unwashed, miserable, mundane reality.
Like everything is just covered in dust.
Exactly. Lewis is documenting a profound truth about how bereavement operates on the human condition here.
How so?
Well, the mind might momentarily wander.
Right.
You might focus on boiling water for key.
Or reading a paragraph in a book.
Yeah. But the atmosphere of loss remains diffused through your entire perception.
It coats everything.
It does. The natural world hasn't changed its physical properties.
Yeah.
I mean, the berries are still red, the clock still keeps time.
Sure.
But to the mourner, the universe appears as though it has inherited the absence of the person they lost.
The universe inherited the absence. That is, wow.
The grief is no longer just an emotion Lewis is feeling in his chest. It has become the literal lens through which his brain is decoding reality.
You know, it makes me think of wearing someone else's extremely strong prescription glasses.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because you put them on and technically your eyes are still taking in light.
You're still seeing.
Yeah, you can still see that the trees are trees and the floor is the floor, but everything is slightly distorted.
The floor looks tilted.
The edges of the room are blurred. And if you keep those glasses on for more than 5 minutes, you don't just feel sad, you start to feel deeply nauseous.
You get a migraine.
Exactly, a migraine. It's a physical revulsion. And for Lewis, the grief has literally entered his perception itself.
And the worst part is he cannot take the glasses off.
He can't. He's stuck with them.
He is. But he does attempt this deliberate change in posture, which brings us to a crucial pivot point in Chapter 3.
Okay, what does he do?
He is exhausted by the nausea. So he writes, and I quote, "Feelings and feelings and feelings. Let me try thinking instead."
Ah, feelings versus thinking.
Right. He recognizes that living entirely within the volatile emotional weather of grief is paralyzing.
Because emotions just loop, right? They don't really lead anywhere.
Exactly. It yields no new information, only cyclical pain. So he decides to subject his feelings to severe intellectual judgment.
He wants to use his brain.
He turns to rational reflection to see what actual objective evidence this tragedy has introduced into his worldview.
But the wild thing is, when he makes that shift from feeling to thinking, the comfort doesn't actually come.
No, it backfires, almost.
Right. He doesn't look at his vast theological library, wrap it around himself like a warm blanket, and find peace.
Not at all.
Instead, he discovers something terrifying about his own belief system. He realizes his theology isn't holding him up.
And the historical context here makes his realization profoundly jarring for the reader.
Because of who he is.
Yes. We were talking about C.S. Lewis, the man who, decades earlier, authored The Problem of Pain. He was one of the greatest Christian apologists of the modern era. He had defended the goodness of God.
And the necessity of human suffering.
Exactly, to millions of readers across the globe. He had constructed this massive, brilliant intellectual architecture to explain why a loving God allows agony.
I mean, he literally wrote the textbook that other people read when they were grieving.
He did. Yet, when the theoretical became visceral, when the cancer actually invaded his own home.
When he had to watch the woman he loved scream in pain.
Yes, that massive intellectual structure completely crumbled. He realizes that his pre-loss faith was largely untested.
It's easy to be brave on paper.
So true. And he uses two incredibly potent analogies in this chapter to describe this. First, he says he was like a man who trusted a rope only as long as it hung slack.
A slack rope.
Right. You can look at a thick piece of rope coiled on the ground and say, I trust this rope.
Sure, because it's not doing anything.
But the moment you are dangled over a cliff and your actual physical weight is suspended over the void, you realize you didn't trust the rope at all.
You trusted the solid ground you were standing on before.
Exactly. And the second analogy he uses is building a house of cards.
This one hits hard.
It does.
Yeah.
He says he built this magnificent theological structure using harmless intellectual counters.
Little pieces of paper.
Little pieces of paper labeled with heavy words like illness, pain, and death.
But they're just paper.
Right. It is remarkably easy to build a grand soaring tower when the bricks you are using are weightless.
You can stack them perfectly.
You can. But then reality came along and placed an actual heavy bleeding brick of real death right on top of the cards.
And the whole thing immediately collapsed.
The collapse forces him to recognize that his faith was, to a frightening degree, theoretical.
It was an intellectual exercise rather than a resilient, suffering-tested reality.
Precisely.
I have to pause you here, though.
Sure.
Because I'm putting myself in the shoes of the listener right now.
Yeah.
If I am listening to this and I hear that a brilliant, devoted, praying mind like C.S. Lewis realizes his faith was mostly a theoretical house of cards,
It's scary.
that is utterly terrifying. I mean, if Lewis failed the test, what hope do I have?
That's the natural question.
How do you know, right in this moment, That you aren't just playing with harmless counters. Is God just waiting to drop a brick on your life to expose you as a fraud?
Well, that fear is exactly what Lewis is confronting, and it forces us directly into the pages of Scripture.
Okay, where are we going?
Specifically, Christ's teachings on the nature of true faith. To answer your question, we really have to look at the parable of the wise and foolish builders in Matthew chapter 7.
Oh, right. Jesus addresses this exact terror, doesn't he? The terror of the collapsing house.
He does.
The man who built his house on the rock versus the man who built his house on the sand. We learn this in Sunday school, but I feel like we strip it of its actual gravity.
While they completely strip it of its gravity, we make it a cute song for kids.
Exactly.
But let's do some rigorous biblical analysis on that text, because the original Greek language unveils the reality of what Lewis is experiencing.
Okay, lay it on us.
And it completely alters how we view the survival of our faith. In Matthew 7, Jesus describes the wise builder whose house survives the storm.
Right.
The Greek verb used for the laying of the foundation is tethamelito.
Tethamelito.
Yes, it is a pluperfect passive verb.
Okay, stop right there. For those of us without a seminary degree or a background in ancient Greek grammar, break down pluperfect passive.
Sure.
What does that actually mean for the person sitting in the hospital waiting room?
Right. A pluperfect tense describes an action that was completed entirely in the past, but which has abiding, permanent, unshakable results in the present.
Okay, so it's done, but the effects are still happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the passive voice means the action was performed by an external agent, not by the subject.
Not by the guy building the house.
Right. So the foundation of the wise man's house was sovereignly established by God upon the rock, which is the Greek word Petra.
Wow.
The wise man isn't holding his house together by the sheer force of his own willpower.
He isn't surviving the storm because he's gripping the walls tightly enough?
No. God poured the foundation in eternity past, and therefore the house cannot fall.
So the survival of the house has nothing to do with the architectural skill of the builder or the emotional fortitude of the person inside.
Nothing at all.
It survives purely because of the unyielding nature of the bedrock and the fact that God placed it there.
Precisely. Now contrast that with the foolish man. He builds on sand.
Which is the theoretical faith.
Jesus says this represents the one who hears the words, meaning he has intellectual assent, he knows the theology, he might even write books about it.
Like Lewis did.
But he lacks regenerating grace. He has a notional theoretical faith. He is playing with counters.
And then the storm hits.
Notice that Jesus promises the storm. The text uses a triadic structure to describe the violence.
Triadic structure.
3 parts. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew. It is a total, multi-directional assault on the structure.
It's the phone call from the oncologist.
Yes.
It's the physical decline. It's the silence of the empty house after the funeral, the rain, the flood, the wind.
And what happens to the house built on sand? The Greek text emphasizes catastrophic ruin. It says, and great was the fall of it.
Just total devastation.
So, to answer your question about how you know if you are playing with counters severe suffering, is God's sovereign diagnostic tool.
A diagnostic tool.
Suffering does not create the weakness in our faith. It unmasks it.
Wait, let's sit with that for a second.
Okay.
Suffering doesn't create the weakness, it unmasks it. But I struggle with the implications of that.
Why is that?
Are you saying God actively designed the cancer, designed the storm, just to break Lewis down and prove a point?
I see where you're going.
Because God is omniscient. He already knows our faith is weak. Why force someone through the agony of a collapsing house just to expose what he already knew from eternity past?
Sounds cruel.
It sounds incredibly cruel.
It sounds cruel if you assume the goal of the universe is our immediate emotional comfort.
Which is that therapeutic Christianity we talked about.
Exactly. But God's goal is our ultimate indestructible holiness. You are right. God knows all things exhaustively from eternity. He does not demolish the card castle to learn something new about Lewis.
Or to learn something new about us.
No. He demolishes it so that we can recognize our own spiritual bankruptcy.
So the unmasking is for our benefit, not his information.
Exactly. He shatters the illusion so we stop relying on what theologians call Arminian self-reliance.
Define that term for the listener. What does Arminian self-reliance look like in the context of grief?
Broadly speaking, in this context, Arminian self-reliance is the subconscious belief that your own free will, your own intellectual grasp of theology, and your own emotional strength are what sustain your relationship with God.
Like it all depends on me.
It's the belief that you are holding on to God. But a faith generated by human willpower cannot survive the grave.
It just can't.
God exposes the theoretical faith. He knocks down the house of cards so that you are forced to abandon your self-reliance and cling entirely to his sovereign grace.
He breaks the counterfeit so he can anchor you to the real.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that brings us to one of the most agonizing, visceral sections of the entire journal.
Well, this part is so hard to read.
It really is, because once the house of cards has fallen, the believer is left standing in the absolute rubble.
Just looking at the mess.
Yeah. Lewis is standing in the wreckage of his apologetics, staring up at the sky, violently interrogating the character of the God who sent the storm.
He pulls no punches.
None. He looks at the sheer degrading agony his wife endured, the pain that medications couldn't touch, and he asks a horrifying question.
He wonders, is God a surgeon or is he a cosmic sadist?
It is a brutal question.
It's brutal, but it is profoundly honest. And honestly, it is a question almost everyone asks in the dark.
I think so too.
Lewis uses the metaphor of an animal strapped to a table in a laboratory.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, to the animal, the pain is absolute, incomprehensible, and overwhelming. The animal has no capacity to understand the intent of the person holding the knife.
It just knows it hurts.
Right. So Lewis wonders, is the entity holding the knife over humanity a vivisector, a cosmic sadist who tortures creatures merely for cruel experimentation and twisted pleasure?
Just hurting us for fun.
Or is he an inexorable surgeon, one who cuts deeply without anesthesia solely to heal and eradicate a fatal disease?
And the terrifying part of that metaphor is that from the perspective of the animal strapped to the table, the pain feels absolutely identical.
There's no difference in the sensation.
Right. The scalpel slicing into the skin feels exactly the same, whether it is wielded by a murderer or a lifesaver.
Exactly.
And because we are the animal on the table, our immediate sensory experience gives us zero clues about the character of the one holding the knife.
Which highlights the extreme danger of interpreting theology through the lens of human emotion.
It's like judging a dentist's medical credentials entirely by how much the drill hurts.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Right. If you sit in the dental chair and the dentist hits a raw nerve, you experience blinding pain.
You want to jump out of the chair.
But you don't jump out and scream, "You're a murderer." You're not a real dentist. A real dentist would never cause pain.
No, you endure it.
You tolerate the drill because you have an intellectual framework that understands the pain is a necessary byproduct of removing the decay.
You know the decay will kill the tooth.
Exactly. So you submit to the drill. But when it comes to God, because we cannot visibly see the spiritual decay he is removing, the moment the drill hits the nerve of our lives, we immediately assume malice.
That analogy perfectly captures the limitations of our perception. Emotional intensity is a terrible interpreter of objective truth.
It really is.
Lewis realizes that his despair feels intensely persuasive, simply because it is immediate and agonizing. But the animal's reaction only proves that the cut hurts.
It provides zero evidence regarding the moral identity of the operator.
Precisely. Revelation, not our mood, must be the judge of providence. We have to look to Scripture to tell us who is holding the knife. But it is right here, in the frantic desperation to make sense of the pain, that Lewis makes a significant and, frankly, dangerous theological misstep.
Yeah, we have to address this because it's a stumbling block for a lot of readers.
It is.
Lewis starts to speculate about where his wife is right now.
Right.
And he was a mid-20th century Anglican, heavily influenced by high church Anglo-Catholic thought.
Very much so.
As he grapples with this surgeon metaphor, he suggests that because Joy was not perfectly sinless when she died, she might currently be undergoing post-mortem purgatorial sufferings.
Which is highly problematic.
He imagines that God is continuing the painful surgery on her soul in the afterlife, scouring away her remaining stains.
And this is where Reformed orthodoxy must firmly, uncompromisingly step in to correct the text.
We have to push back here.
We can appreciate Lewis's raw honesty, but we must subject his theology to the Word of God.
Always.
Lewis's insight that sanctification is incomplete in this life is morally sound. I mean, none of us die perfectly sinless.
Right, that's obvious.
But his solution, post-mortem purgatorial suffering, is an outright rejection of biblical sufficiency.
Explain that.
Let's look at the actual lexicon of testing in the New Testament. In 1 Peter chapter 1, the Apostle Peter discusses the fiery trials of our faith. He uses the Greek word dokimazo.
Dokimazo. What is the historical context of that word? How would a first-century reader understand it?
In the ancient world, specifically in Greco-Roman metallurgy, Dokimazu referred to the precise process of putting precious metal, like gold or silver, into a blazing furnace.
Okay.
The assayer wasn't trying to destroy the metal. He was melting away the dross, the impurities, to prove the gold's authenticity and increase its value.
So it is a process of proving and purifying.
Yes, not of penal destruction.
So the fire is intense, but the intent is entirely restorative.
Exactly. Furthermore, let's look at Hebrews chapter 12, which extensively addresses the nature of divine chastisement. The writer uses the Greek noun paideia. Yes, in classical Greek culture, paideia was the loving, comprehensive training, education, and discipline of a legitimate son and heir.
It's fatherly discipline meant to cultivate character.
It is not a judge handing down a punitive sentence to a criminal.
That is the critical distinction right there.
It is. The Greek word for punitive judicial condemnation is katakrima.
Katakrima.
And God never, ever exercises katakrima upon his adopted children. He uses paideia.
Wow, okay.
And crucially, Hebrews 12, verse 11, explicitly confines this paideia to this life.
To this side of eternity.
Yes. It says, "For the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." God's surgical cuts, his fatherly discipline, are entirely for our sanctification while we're on this earth.
Okay, for the listener who might be wondering, why does this matter? Why is the idea of a little post-mortem cleaning so dangerous?
That's a fair question.
Because it sounds almost humble, doesn't it? To say, I'm so flawed, surely God will need to keep working on me after I die before I'm fit for heaven. What is the Reformed objection to that exact sentiment?
It sounds like humility to human ears, but in reality, it is deeply insulting to the cross of Jesus Christ.
Insulting.
Yes. To suggest that a believer requires even 1 second of post-mortem scouring is to blaspheme the absolute sufficiency of Christ's penal substitutionary atonement.
Oh, let's unpack that phrase, penal substitutionary atonement, because that is the bedrock of what we are talking about here.
It is the core of the gospel. Penal means relating to punishment for breaking the law.
Okay.
Substitutionary means someone else took your place.
Christ took our place.
Right. And atonement means making amends or paying the debt. When Jesus hung on the cross and cried out, "It is finished," the Greek word recorded in John's gospel is tetelestai.
Tetelestai.
It was an accounting term that meant paid in full.
Not partially paid?
Paid in full. Christ completely purged all sin. He absorbed every single drop of divine punitive wrath meant for his people. There was nothing left to pay.
So there's no more scouring needed.
None.
Yeah.
Therefore, as Reformed theology beautifully outlines, at death, the souls of believers are immediately made perfect in holiness and pass into glory.
There's no waiting room.
There is no secondary furnace.
That is just, the surgery is finished the absolute microsecond they step into eternity.
It is entirely complete.
That is incredibly freeing. To know that the woman he loved is not currently suffering under a divine scalpel in the afterlife, she is perfectly whole.
Yes, she is resting.
Understanding that God is a surgeon rather than a sadist, and that his surgery is confined strictly to this earthly life, it clarifies God's actions so much.
It really does.
But Lewis doesn't just keep the surgical light pointed at God.
No, he doesn't.
The genius of this chapter is that Lewis grabs that harsh, blinding surgical light, turns it around, and shines it directly into his own heart.
And what he finds is not pretty.
He begins to ruthlessly analyze the nature of his own grief and the nature of his marriage.
Yes, and what the light exposes in his own heart is deeply uncomfortable. Lewis has this startling realization that just stops him in his tracks.
What does he realize?
Well, he has been weeping, pacing the floors, desperately crying out for H to return to him.
Just begging for her back.
But he suddenly stops and asks himself, is this frantic cry actually for her good?
Oh.
If he possessed a magic wand and could command her to return, like Lazarus emerging from the tomb, what would he actually be doing?
Man, he would be pulling her out of the perfected, painless rest of glory.
Dragging her soul back.
Dragging it back into a decaying, cancer-ravaged physical body and forcing her to endure the sheer terror and agony of dying all over again at some point in the future.
Exactly. He realizes that bringing her back would be an act of profound cruelty to her.
Just an incredibly selfish act.
Which leads to the inescapable conclusion. His desperate demand for her return is not driven by love for her.
It's driven entirely by possessive self-interest.
He just wants his old life back.
Right. He wants his friend, his sounding board, his comfort. He wants the empty chair at the table filled so he doesn't have to hurt anymore.
It's about his pain, not her joy.
If that is such a devastating mirror to look into.
It really is.
When we are consumed by grief, are we sometimes just grieving for our own lost comfort?
More often than we'd like to admit.
How do we untangle genuine, self-giving love from our own possessive, parasitical need for another person?
That untangling is the precise purification that grief enacts on the fallen human heart.
It burns away the selfishness.
It exposes the possessiveness embedded in our affections. Fallen people rarely love purely. We often love another person both for the unique, irreplaceable image bearer they are and for the security, the identity, and the psychological companionship that the relationship supplies to us.
So it's mixed.
It's very mixed. To truly understand why the loss feels so violently destructive, we have to go back to the original creation ordinance in the book of Genesis.
Right, let's go there.
Lewis's profound feeling of being severed can only be understood through the biblical doctrine of marriage.
Because Lewis and Joy weren't just roommates who enjoyed each other's company.
No, they're done.
They weren't just best friends.
Precisely. Genesis 1:27 establishes that God created humanity, male and female, distinct complementary bearers of his divine image.
Okay.
Then in Genesis 2:24, we are given the theological blueprint for marriage. The Hebrew phrase used is basar echad,
Basar echad, one flesh.
one flesh. This is not merely a biological function for procreation, nor is it merely a legal contract recognized by the state.
It's much deeper than that.
It is an irreducible, organic, ontological fusion of two distinct persons into a single new entity. The Apostle Paul echoes this mystery in Ephesians 5, stating that he who loves his wife loves his own body.
So when death strikes a marriage, it's not just the interruption of a lovely dance where one partner just, leaves the floor.
No, it is a violent amputation. Amputation is the exact theological and physical reality. You have an organic living whole that is torn in half by the unnatural curse of death.
Wow.
Lewis captures this perfectly when he describes himself as a one-legged man trying to learn how to use crutches.
Because half of him is gone.
You don't just miss the person's company. You are missing a literal, integrated part of your own flesh. The deeply worn roads of habit in the brain, the instinct to call out to her from the other room, the instinct to turn and share a joke with her, all of those neurological and emotional pathways hit a solid brick wall.
But inside that agony of amputation, Lewis notices something completely counterintuitive.
Yes, he does.
He realizes that when he is in the absolute throes of panic, when he is frantically grasping for her memory, weeping uncontrollably, he actually can't remember her face clearly.
The memory is blurred.
But when he stops grasping, when his intense, desperate longing briefly subsides and he just sits in the quiet planet, he actually remembers her better.
This is a phenomenal pastoral insight for anyone walking through bereavement right now.
It really is.
Frantic, possessive longing acts as a thick, distorting curtain. When we are entirely consumed with our own pain, every memory of the deceased is aggressively bent to serve our sorrow.
We twist their memory to match how sad we are.
We do. We reduce a complex, vibrant human being into a mere emblem of our grief. But when the subjective sorrow momentarily lifts, Lewis finds that H returns to his mind with striking clarity and otherness.
Otherness.
He remembers her not as the source of his current misery, but as a distinct, independent, joyful person.
Which is such an important, liberating word for anyone listening right now who is grieving.
Truly.
So often, people feel an immense, crushing guilt when they have a good day.
Oh, survivor's guilt is real.
If they laugh at a joke or if they go 3 hours without crying, they panic. They think, if I stop hurting, it means I've stopped loving them. My ongoing pain is the only monument left to my love.
But that's a lie.
It is. Lewis is discovering that cultivating deliberate misery is actually a form of vanity.
It is.
It's making the death entirely about you and your capacity to suffer. Joyful, clear remembrance often honors the dead far more than ritualized, self-imposed misery.
Precisely. The reduction of your subjective anguish is not the reduction of your objective love.
That's a great way to put it.
But recognizing the depth of this amputation and recognizing our utter, humiliating inability to save our loved ones from the grave, it pushes Lewis and it pushes the reader toward a terrifying cliff.
Because we hit our limit.
Human love, no matter how pure or unselfish it becomes through the fire of grief, is ultimately powerless against death.
We can remember them perfectly, but we cannot rescue them.
No, we can't.
This drives our deep dive to its absolute theological zenith. The failure of human love forces us to look to the only one who actually has power over the grave.
Yeah.
Lewis writes about this hypothetical trait that I think anyone who's watched a loved one suffer has imagined.
The desire to take their place.
He looks back at what Joy suffered, the bone cancer literally eating her skeleton, the surgeries, the radiation, and he wishes, with every fiber of his being, that he could have taken her physical pain upon himself.
It's a natural instinct.
He wishes he could have lain in that hospital bed, absorbing the cancer into his own bones so she could go free.
Yeah.
But he very quickly realizes the absolute emptiness of that wish. It's an easy, romantic promise to make in his journal because it can't possibly be tested.
It's impossible.
We cannot magically transfer her cancer into his body. Human love says, "Let me bear it for you," but it completely lacks the ontological power to execute the trade.
It lacks the power, and often, frankly, it lacks the courage if the terrifying exchange were actually possible.
That's a fair point.
But this realization of total human impotence creates the necessary space for Lewis to recognize the true substitute, Jesus Christ.
The only one who could actually do it.
Lewis writes this breathtaking line, and I have to quote it here.
Well,
He says, "It was allowed to weigh. One, we are told, he has done vicariously whatever can be so done." He replies to our babble, "You cannot and you dare not. I could and dared."
Could and dared. That gives me chills every time I read it.
It should give you chills because this is the beating heart of the gospel.
Yeah.
This is the doctrine of penal substitutionary atonement realized right in the face of death. Human love merely wishes it could take the place of the beloved. Christ actually did it.
He really did.
He didn't just sympathize with our suffering from a safe, detached balcony in heaven. He didn't just look down and feel bad for our pain. He stepped into the laboratory. He climbed onto the vivisection table.
So he became the animal on the table.
He became the ultimate sacrifice. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God."
Wow.
Christ absorbed the infinite, unmitigated judicial wrath of God against sin. He drank the unmixed cup of divine justice down to the dregs.
And this ties perfectly back to our earlier point about the surgeon and the sadist.
So?
Because Jesus bore the punitive wrath of God, the suffering that a believer experiences today contains absolutely zero judicial punishment.
None whatsoever.
I want to stop and underline this because this is massive for the listener.
It changes everything.
You are saying that because Jesus took the full punishment on the cross, when a Christian gets a cancer diagnosis or loses a spouse in a car accident or suffers a miscarriage, God is not punishing them for a sin they committed 10 years ago.
Absolutely not. The penalty have been entirely exhausted on the cross. To believe God is punishing you is to believe Christ's sacrifice was insufficient.
It's saying the cross wasn't enough.
Right. There is no double jeopardy in God's courtroom. He will not exact payment from the believer that he has already exacted from his son.
That is so profound.
When God wields the scalpel in a believer's life, it is strictly the great physician cutting away the fatal disease of our self-reliance and conforming us to the image of Jesus.
It's for our healing.
It is intensely painful, yes, but it is entirely rooted in adopting covenantal love, not condemning wrath.
That reframes everything. It changes the entire architecture of how we process grief.
It really does.
But let's be careful here, because we aren't saying this theology means you just paste a fake plastic smile on your face and pretend you aren't bleeding, right?
Oh, definitely not.
We mentioned Lazarus earlier, the man Jesus raised from the dead. What always strikes me about that narrative in John 11 is verse 35.
Jesus wept.
The shortest verse in the English Bible,
Yeah.
Jesus wept. Think about the context here. He is standing at the tomb of his friend. He is God incarnate.
He knows what's about to happen.
He knows with absolute divine certainty that in about 60 seconds, he is going to shout, "Lazarus, come out," and a dead man is going to walk out of that grave alive.
The victory is literally seconds away.
He knows the victory is imminent, yet he wept. The Greek implies he groaned in his spirit, he was deeply moved, even angry.
And this is a vital corrective for a reformed understanding of suffering. Having robust, sovereign theology does not require stoicism.
We don't have to just stiff upper lip it.
Exactly. Jesus weeping at the tomb permanently authorizes human lament.
It authorizes it. I love that.
It proves that death is a real, hideous, unnatural enemy. Death was not part of the original design. It is a violent violation of God's good creation.
It's an intruder.
Yes. Jesus wasn't weeping because he lacked faith in the resurrection. He was weeping because He was looking full in the face of the sheer devastation, the heartbreak, and the squalor that sin and death had wrought on the humanity he loved.
He saw the pain it caused.
He held the absolute objective certainty of resurrection power in one hand and the genuine visceral agony of human loss in the other.
So we are allowed to hate death. We are allowed to cry until we can't breathe.
We must hate death, but we hate it as a defeated enemy. Because of Christ's victory on the cross and his subsequent empty tomb, the timeline of grief changes for the believer.
The timeline changes.
Grief doesn't magically disappear the moment you understand theology, but its trajectory is fundamentally altered. It is now bounded by a definitive eschatological end date.
Which perfectly transitions us to the end of Chapter 3 in Lewis's journal.
Right.
Because after all these profound theological breakthroughs, realizing God is a surgeon, untangling his own selfish love, resting in the vicarious suffering of Christ, you would think the chapter would end on this triumphant, peaceful high note.
You'd expect a happy ending.
The storm clouds part, cue the majestic music, roll the credits. But it doesn't?
No, it doesn't. And that is why this book endures. It is jarringly honest about the lived experience of suffering.
Just when Lewis seems to have reached this incredible spiritual plateau, the acute agony returns. The wave crashes right back over his head.
He gets pulled right back under.
He realizes that grief isn't a clean, linear journey with a tidy therapeutic ending. You don't just check off the 5 stages of grief on a clipboard and graduate to perfect peace.
It is not a straight line.
It is a spiral.
A spiral staircase, exactly. Lewis notes that he keeps revisiting the same emotional despair, but he wonders if he's perhaps taking it from a slightly different altitude.
You know, it makes me think of hiking a steep mountain path that wraps around a central peak.
Okay, paint that picture.
You hike for hours, your muscles are burning, you are sweating, you feel like you've made so much progress, and then you look down over the edge of the trail and you see the exact same valley below you that you saw 3 hours ago.
Right, the same view.
The same river, the same patch of trees, and the despair hits you like, I haven't gone anywhere. I am walking in circles. The pain is exactly the same as it was on day one. I'm right back where I started.
It's so demoralizing.
But if you look closely, yes, you are looking at the same valley, but you are looking at it from a higher elevation.
You've moved up.
You are on a spiral. You keep hitting the exact same emotional coordinates of sadness, anger, and longing, but you are higher up the mountain.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. The recurrence of acute grief does not equal spiritual failure.
Say that again for the listener in the back.
Let me say that again for anyone listening. A returning wave of sorrow does not invalidate the theological ground you have gained. Lewis discovers that the same wound can ache repeatedly, but the repetition occurs under a providence that is actively, sovereignly moving history forward.
So it's not pointless repetition.
No. The mourner may not occupy precisely the same spiritual place, even if the tears feel identical to the day of the funeral, but to survive the grueling nature of that spiral, the believer must constantly lift their eyes from the path and look to the ultimate eschatological comfort.
Eschatological meaning relating to the end of the world, the final destiny of humanity.
Yes. Specifically, the bodily resurrection.
Break that down for us, because when we talk about hope in grief, people often just say, well, they're in a better place.
Which is true, but...
Which is true. But it feels a bit thin when you are staring at an empty chair.
It does feel thin. The Apostle Paul writes to the church in Thessalonica specifically to address the crushing, paralyzing weight of bereavement.
Okay.
In 1 Thessalonians 4:13-14, he commands them not to sorrow as those who have no hope. Notice carefully, he does not say, do not sorrow.
Right. He expects tears.
He expects tears. He says, do not sorrow like the pagans who believe death is a black hole of extinction, a permanent annihilation of the person.
Okay.
And the Greek verb Paul uses for the deceased believers in that passage is magnificent. It's kaimao.
Kaimao, which translates to what?
It translates to falling asleep.
It's the sleeping.
Paul deliberately avoids using the stark, absolute Greek word for death, apothnesko, without qualification.
Why does he do that?
Because for the Christian, the physical body is merely resting in the grave. It is asleep.
Like it's going to wake up.
Exactly. We established earlier that the soul is already immediately perfected and rejoicing in the conscious presence of Christ, but the physical body sleeps in the dirt, waiting for the alarm clock of the archangel's trumpet.
I love that image, the alarm clock.
The pain of the amputated one flesh that Lewis describes will not last forever.
True.
Lasting healing isn't found in psychological coping mechanisms or time healing all wounds.
No.
It is found in the promised physical return of Jesus Christ.
He will literally wipe away every tear from their eyes. He will conquer the last enemy, which is death. The violent amputation of the body and the soul and the amputation of relationships will be completely reversed.
The grave is not a permanent incinerator. It is a temporary holding cell, and Jesus Christ holds the keys.
What a profound place to land.
It really is.
Let's take a breath and just synthesize everything we've covered on this incredible, heavy journey through Chapter 3 of A Grief Observed.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We have seen how God, in his severe and sovereign mercy, shatters our theoretical house of cards. He sends the storm of affliction not to destroy us in wrath, but to brutally expose our Arminian self-reliance, forcing us to anchor our hope directly onto the pluperfect bedrock of Jesus Christ.
The only safe place.
Right. We've explored how the great surgeon uses the agonizing scalpel of loss to purify our possessive love, untangling our selfishness from our genuine affection.
It's doing the necessary work.
And most importantly, we've seen how Christ's penal substitutionary atonement transforms our suffering, taking it from a place of punitive judicial wrath and turning it into a place of loving, fatherly discipline, all guarded by the ironclad promise of the bodily resurrection.
It is the ultimate paradigm shift. It moves the grieving Christian from subjective, fragile emotionalism to the objective, unshakable reality of covenantal grace.
God's promise to hold on to us when we are too weak to hold on to him.
Exactly.
So as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Leave him with something to chew on.
We started this hour by talking about that X-ray machine pointing directly at the foundation of your soul, exposing the hidden cracks.
Right.
If the shattering of our earthly certainties is exactly what it takes to expose our deep-seated self-centeredness, could it be that the darkest, most suffocating valleys of grief are exactly where we finally learn how to love God for who he is, rather than what he can do for us? Could it be that suffering is where we finally learn to love our neighbors for who they are, rather than simply the comfort they provide us?
That's a heavy thought.
Maybe the total collapse of the card castle is the only way the real eternal house ever gets built.
Amen to that.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive on Reformed thinking. We hope this exploration equips you for the storms ahead. May you rest securely in the unbreakable covenant of grace, knowing the foundation has already been permanently laid.